Thank you for joining us on a very special Werewolf Radar episode. I'm Roger Norquist, and today I'm going to be interviewing Wedding 93 director Paul Zagaris. In your travels throughout the internet looking for paranormal content, you may have come across the trailer for a documentary titled Wedding 93. The documentary tells a true story of Ra and Bull, two Cambodian youths who were arranged to be married in 1993. Footage of the wedding ceremony is mixed masterfully with recent interviews of the families who attended the wedding. The movie is a phenomenal example of the paranormal documentary genre.
Now with me in the bunker, the director of Wedding 93, Paul Zagaris. Paul is the director and producer of this great piece of cinema, and I cannot wait to pick his brain, maybe see if we can use it for a brainy stew. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks for having me in here. I'd heard about this story when I was living in Modesto. There's a huge Cambodian population there, and we had heard over and over again that this thing had happened, and we didn't know what it was. And by the time I was sort of able to piece it together and make some phone calls, and, you know, a lot of my friends and that have family over there, we basically just connected with people over there and we're able to kind of make it. I made the trip over there in 2018, and I was able to film a bunch of interviews while I was there. And then as the story developed, I was able to kind of put things together. You know, it was interesting because I had to go through two editors. The first editor couldn't handle a lot of the footage because
it's horrific. I mean, in like a true horror sense. Like there was moments where like I'm putting down the headphones, I'm going to step away and make a sandwich real quick.
Really? That's
the first time she screams was honestly one of those times where we're like, oh,
that's fascinating to hear. I mean, I know it's kind of morbid to think that we're taking these events and turning them into something, you know, bizarre, but we had permission from a lot of the players involved. And so, no, I'm surprised to hear that. Okay, so I have a question for you.
Yes.
When you watched the movie, did you watch the movie with the lights on or the lights off?
Oh, I'm a lights on person. I can't watch horror films. I'm a lights on. Let's have my girlfriend in the room so I can talk to her as well.
So you could jump scare into her arms?
Yeah, pretty much. She's my knight in shining armor, and she saves me in such times.
Okay, I like that. That's a good way to. That's funny. Yeah, no, I was kind of curious. Big screen or small screen?
Small screen. Yes, I watched it right here on the same screen I'm looking at you at. I just put it on the computer, and even small screen, it was an effective piece of work.
We didn't know what kind of reception this was going to get, and we posted the trailer online not that long ago, and the trailer itself went viral for whatever reason. People on we didn't even post on TikTok or Twitter or anything, and it ended up people cut it and edited it and analyzed it, and so to see and then to get messages from you and stuff. This is a huge honor. I mean, as a filmmaker, you know, as a documentarian with another project out right now as well. I've got a Vietnam War documentary that we just released. And zero connections with anybody in the industry. This is like 100% grassroots.
So like you heard, I guess, kind of like the American Cambodian tales of this, and then went to Cambodia to get the more firsthand accounts.
Correct.
Were there kind of like that telephone game phenomenon to where like there were significant differences in the American Cambodian community?
There was a bit of telephone problem. Most of the Cambodians that I know here speak Cambodian, but they speak second generation Cambodian, other than the parents. So I was using a lot of my buddies who are fluent in Cambodian in their own way, but not really fluent in Cambodian as far as being over there. So I actually had to get a translator while I was over there. And then, you know, my director of photography, you know, we had a girl translating for us, and then my director of photography and I, who pretty much only spoke English. So it was difficult. It wasn't easy to figure out what was going on because a lot of people didn't want to talk about it. And then I didn't know what I had until after I had it. I would say probably about 10% of what I was told in the States was what I actually figured out. The story I had here was I think it was set in a house, and there was some superstitions about a ghost, and there was like some other superstitions. So by the time, it was the story that I was told. You know, like say there's 3 or 4 families that are all telling me, oh yeah, there's this family that had this happen to them, this happened to them. it was probably about like 10-15% of what I was told in the US is what actually I figured out when I was over there.
That's crazy. That's just like, we know a little bit about it. And then you go over there and they're just like, no, here's the meat of this sandwich you've been told.
I kind of knew that going in, especially with the translation problem, because not knowing the language, I knew that I was going to run into, I knew that I was going to record and not know what they were saying, even though I have a translator.
Yes.
So I knew there was going to be a lot of that. It was one of those things where we just sort of had to press play and just hope that, and then me just keep focusing on the little tidbits that I would hear, refocus the energy on questions and dialogue that would go that direction. The translation part was one thing because you're in the moment, you're experiencing the event, you miss things. Like, for example, we can focus on one thing. So when you're in the event, you're just like focused on what, talking to people. You're missing everything else. Then by the time you actually look at what you have, it's like, okay, well, actually I have way more than my own personal experience. With the translation, though, of the literal translation of what they're saying, that ended up becoming a little bit more layered because now what they're saying could be translated 3 different ways. And I've got one person translating it written who may not be they're not a professional. They're just a friend of a friend who's translating the language. And it's like, is it being literally translated?
Mm-hmm.
Does this word mean this? The mom they were freaking out inside the actual like hut. And then once they were freaking out, the mom says something and it had to do with, I don't know, it was basically like get the demon out of her or something, but it wasn't, so there's a bunch of that. There's a bunch of those literal translations. So that's when I had to really dig into the language.
We hear so many stories that are like unbelievable, essentially. What was really that like made you go like, no, this is what I'm going to find footage of. This is what I'm going to point my camera at. Like, what was it about this story that was like, this is what I'm going to spend some time on?
So old Bull. So Bull is the
betrothed male.
Yeah. Talking to him for the first time because he didn't talk on the phone. So it was just meeting him in person, talking to him that was probably when I knew that this really affected them psychologically.
Yeah, he got devastated physically, mentally, financially, like in any way that you can lose something. It seems like he lost something.
Yeah. His farm, it was devastated and everybody knew it too, but he didn't. I mean, some of that isn't necessarily, there's a lot of superstition in the culture. I was trying to be as neutral as possible without going into the superstition because I knew there was going to be a lot of American naysayers or westernized, that was the balance I wanted to strike when I was editing. So my first editor, I couldn't even get him to finish the cut. I think he was disturbed by the footage. And then the second editor, that's why it took me 2 years to edit this thing. Basically, the first editor got through the first cut and it was good, but he wasn't willing to cut some of the footage, I think, because it bothered him. And then other than that, I knew what we had by the time I started to digitize the 90s footage. I knew what I had, and I knew that there was other stuff that we didn't have that was still missing, but I knew that what we had was going to be enough for a narrative. And so thankfully I did those interviews because those interviews kind of kept me on the train on the track.
Oh yeah, they were a great connective piece in there to where like you could have just shown the footage and then the original cameraman who's doing or cameraman, I guess, phenomenal work for people who just kind of bought some camcorders and then we're like, let's just shoot this wedding.
We are getting annihilated online in a good way with people picking apart whether or not those the cameras were available. Because he had money at the time, he was the only one with cameras. And there's a lot of stuff at the beginning that I showed. Some of it's not necessarily in sequence, but you can't really tell. Like at the beginning with those kids, like picking up the snakes and stuff like that. That was good footage for us to have originally because it showed what was going on. I mean, you can't fake the clothing, you can't fake music, any ambient noise, overhead, any sort of like wires in the sky. Like you wouldn't be able to, it would take a tremendous amount of effort to fake all that. But the camera guys, one of the cameras gets lost in the middle of it. And the footage is like red with one of the cameras.
Have you yourself, like even while you were there in the community talking to people, experienced like anything that you could kind of attribute to the paranormal?
I believe there's curses out there. I mean, I'm definitely a spiritual person. I'm also very literal, so it's tough because I'm extremely analytical and literal. I think because the culture is so different than mine, I can put a buffer between me and what's going on. So I didn't really absorb a lot of what their anxiety was. I do know that it has affected other people around me in ways that I wouldn't have expected.
Right. It seems that your first editor was definitely affected by the footage.
Yeah, and that was not something I expected to experience. I had to deal with that in a very literal way. I wasn't looking at that event as happening
like an Egyptian tomb curse. We're like, well, this is the curse of the film.
If I thinking back on it now, that's the main thing, right? I could technically look at that like, oh, this whole thing is cursed. It's becoming such a problem even in editing. But to me, I'm thinking, well, no, I want to get this thing done. I mean,
you got a pragmatic approach. We're like, we got to get this shit done.
Yeah, this is it, dude. This is game on right here.
For you, though, having seen, I guess, all the footage, what for you in this whole story was that unbelievable moment? You're here in it and you still can't believe what you're witnessing or what you're being told, but here you are documenting it.
There's an argument around the scene where she's freaking out and at night and they're trying to console her towards the middle end of the movie. And there's smoke plumes. It's really hard to see. Originally I was going to focus on it, but we didn't. I think it's wind. There's like this gust of wind in the room, I think. You know, I had friends of mine being like, no, I think there's something else there. And I was like, I don't want to focus on that. There's that. There's a couple of moments. The fire scene. I would like to hear yours.
When she is perfectly standing in that tree, swiping at various branches, and then just leaps down, is something that like I've only seen in like the rare examples of like possession footages that like this person is in that Zen-like state or something to where like they're spiritually driven by something and it is protecting their body and allowing them to do like feats of balance and strength that like you just can't do normally.
Yeah.
But she's moving so violently up there and the branch that she's on just is kind of still.
I didn't even
She has
that.
such great agility that it seems superhuman in that moment.
I gotta look at that. I didn't even notice that. I wasn't paying attention.
It's a neat footage that your editor and you put in there that is great.
Crazy. Okay, that's good to hear. That's very good to hear.
Thank you, Paul, very much for joining Werewolf Radar in our bunker. Is there anywhere where you want people to check out your work?
I encourage people to check it out on IMDb. I know that our rankings are going up on there, and then just cinematicac.com is my main website. I can't tell you to be able to move people with movies is important. It doesn't happen every day. We get there's a lot of stuff out there, and just to be recognized for that, because I mean, I want to be able to move on to more and more projects. And as a filmmaker, it's very, very difficult when you don't think that your films actually make a difference. But to hear this is huge.
And that concludes Werewolf Radar interviews with Paul Zagaris. Check out Wedding 93 on IMDb and head to his website, cinematicac.com. If you want to support Werewolf Radar and all of our endeavors, that includes 3 weekly episodes plus other paranormal content, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Werewolf Radar.